Commander Kale stood tall on the massive bridge of his warship, the Silent Thunder. Through the enormous viewing windows, he watched orange and red flames dance across another dying planet below. The crystalline energy beams from his fleet cut through cities like hot knives through butter, turning everything they touched into glowing ash. This was just another Tuesday for the Vorthak Empire. For 3,000 years, no one had been able to stop them. Not a single species in the entire galaxy had managed to put up a real fight. The Vorthak were simply too advanced, too powerful, too perfect. Their ships were made of living biometal that could become solid or ghostly at will, passing right through enemy attacks like they weren't even there. When they wanted to strike back, the same hull would harden into something stronger than diamond, but their real advantage was their minds. Every Vorthak warrior was connected to every other through neural links that worked instantly across impossible distances. When one soldier learned something on a planet 1,000 light-years away, every other Vorthak in the Empire knew it within seconds. They fought like a single organism with millions of bodies, perfectly coordinated and absolutely ruthless. Kale adjusted his bioarmor, feeling the living metal shift and adapt to his body temperature. He had personally overseen the conquest of 47 worlds. Each time it was the same story. The Vorthak fleet would appear in the sky, demonstrate their power by destroying a moon or vaporizing a mountain, and within hours, the local species would surrender completely. Smart beings understood when they were outmatched. A young officer named Vex approached, carrying a data tablet that glowed with soft blue light. His movements were precise and efficient, like all Vorthak military personnel. "Commander, our scout ships have finished mapping Sector 7. We found another inhabited world." Kale didn't even turn around. He was watching the final moments of the planet below as the last of its cities crumbled. "Resistance level?" "Practically none, sir. They call themselves humans. Our analysis shows they're still using primitive, kinetic weapons and basic chemical propulsion for space travel. No energy shields, no faster-than-light communication, no bio-enhancement technology. They're maybe 200 years away from achieving basic space civilization." This got Kale's attention, not because the humans were impressive, but because they were so disappointingly backward. He finally turned to look at the tactical display Vex was holding. The planet was indeed small and blue, with white clouds swirling around green and brown continents. It looked peaceful, almost pretty. The kind of world that would make a nice vacation spot after they harvested its resources and relocated any useful specimens. "Population?" Kale asked, though he was already losing interest. "Approximately 8 billion, concentrated in urban centers. They seem to have decent manufacturing capabilities, and their information networks are surprisingly sophisticated for their tech level, but their military technology is centuries behind ours. The strongest weapons we detected were fusion-based explosives, crude but potentially messy if they decide to be difficult." Kyle almost laughed. Fusion weapons against biometal hulls and quantum shielding was like throwing rocks at a mountain. Energy manipulation capabilities? None detected. They burn fossil fuels and use basic nuclear fission. No zero-point energy, no matter conversion, no dimensional folding. They're essentially still banging rocks together compared to us. The commander finally looked directly at the display showing Earth. It rotated slowly, looking vulnerable and isolated in the darkness of space. Standard conquest protocol, then. Take 3 scout ships and make the usual demonstration. Target one of their moons, maybe vaporize a small mountain range. Once they see what we can do, they'll surrender within 6 hours. They always do. Vex nodded and began to input the orders. "Should we prepare harvesting equipment for immediate deployment? Give it 12 hours after their surrender just to be safe. Sometimes the primitive ones need a little time to process what's happening to them. But yes, prep the harvesters. This should be finished by tomorrow." As Vex walked away to relay the orders, Kale turned back to the viewing window. The planet below was now completely dark, its surface cooling from molten red to black. Another world added to the Vorthak Empire, another species either extinct or relocated to work camps. In 3,000 years of expansion, it had never taken more than a single demonstration of power to break any species' will to fight. These humans would be no different. They never were. The three Vorthak scout ships appeared in Earth's sky like ghosts becoming solid. One moment there was empty blue atmosphere. The next moment, massive crystalline vessels hung over New York, London, and Tokyo. Their biometal hulls shifted and rippled like living skin, covered in patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. The ships were beautiful and terrifying at the same time, clearly the work of a civilization far beyond anything Earth had ever imagined. Lieutenant Nix sat in the command chair of the lead vessel, confident this would be over quickly. He activated the universal translator and began broadcasting the same message the Vorthak had used successfully on hundreds of worlds. Primitive inhabitants of this world, you are now subjects of the Vorthak Empire. Surrender immediately and your deaths will be swift. Resist and your suffering will be legendary. You have 1 hour to respond. Nix expected the usual pattern. First would come desperate attempts at communication, then frantic discussions among world leaders followed by inevitable acceptance of their fate. The primitive species always followed the same script when faced with superior technology. Instead, Earth's response came in the form of fire and thunder, from hidden silos buried deep in mountains, from submarines lurking in ocean trenches, from mobile launchers racing across highways. Thousands of nuclear missiles erupted toward the sky. The launches happened simultaneously across every continent, as if the entire planet had been holding its breath and then exhaled destruction all at once. Nix watched in amazement as primitive fusion warheads detonated against his ship's shields. In brilliant flashes of light, the weapons were laughably weak against Vorthak technology, like insects throwing themselves against a window. But their sheer audacity was breathtaking. No species had ever responded to first contact with immediate violence on this scale. Interesting, he muttered, then opened a channel to the other ships. Minor hostile response from the primitives. Nothing to worry about, but it seems they have some fighting spirit. That's when things started going wrong. In Seoul, Captain Hansol was coordinating the largest cyber warfare operation in human history. His fingers flew across holographic displays as he connected with military networks worldwide. General Minho, are you seeing this data from the submarine fleet? In Washington, General Minho was doing something that should have been impossible. He was simultaneously commanding land-based forces while staying in perfect communication with Admiral Yu Jin, whose nuclear submarine was somewhere deep in the Pacific Ocean. Somehow, their quantum computers had synchronized not just with each other, but with every networked device on the planet. Yujin, your team needs to focus on the ship over the Pacific. Hansol, redirect the Seoul supercomputers to target their communication systems, Minho ordered, even as he coordinated missile strikes from 3 different continents. What the Vorthak couldn't understand was how quickly humans had adapted. Within minutes of the alien ships appearing, every smartphone, every internet connection, every satellite dish on Earth had become part of a single massive network. Human programmers had done something their species did naturally, but alien races never expected. They had shared everything instantly and worked together without any central authority telling them what to do. Eugène's submarine crew was working, with hackers in basement apartments in Russia. Korean quantum computer specialists were sharing processing power with university students in Brazil. Military commanders were taking tactical advice from video game players who had figured out alien ship weaknesses just by watching them move. The Vorthak bioneural networks, which had been their greatest advantage for thousands of years, suddenly became their weakness. Human quantum computers, designed by a species that had spent decades learning to connect everything to everything else, began finding ways into alien systems that were supposed to be completely secure. Lieutenant Nix felt his ship shudder as navigation systems started reporting contradictory information. What's happening to our guidance systems? His technical officer's face showed the first sign of worry Nix had seen in years of conquest. Sir, something is interfering with our bioneural links. Our ship's brain is receiving conflicting signals. On Yao. Earth. Yujin smiled grimly as her submarine's computers successfully penetrated the first Vorthak vessel's navigation network. Hansol, we're in. Sending you their system architecture now. Received and distributing worldwide, Hansol replied. Minho, you should have their weakness patterns in 30 seconds. The Vorthak ship over the Pacific began spinning slowly, its organic hull rippling with confusion, as its own navigation system told it to fly in 12 different directions at once. The biometal couldn't phase through matter when it didn't know which way was up, and the massive vessel began falling toward the ocean like a dying whale. Lieutenant Nix watched in horror as one of his ships crashed into the Pacific with a splash that could be seen from space. For the first time in 3,000 years of conquest, a Vorthak vessel had been brought down not by superior weapons, but by something far more dangerous: superior thinking. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were learning. Commander Kale arrived at Earth with 200 of the Vorthak Empire's most powerful warships, expecting to find a broken world begging for mercy. Instead, his sensors showed him something that made his biometal armor crawl with unease. The small blue planet had turned itself into a weapon. Every major city on Earth now bristled with defensive installations that definitely hadn't been there a week ago. Massive railguns emerged from the tops of skyscrapers. Energy shields flickered around population centers. Satellite networks that had been primitive communication devices were now coordinated defense platforms capable of targeting his ships from orbit. "How is this possible?" Kale demanded as he studied the tactical displays. "They were using chemical rockets last week. Now they have energy weapons?" His science officer, a tall Vorthak named Zix, looked equally confused. "Sir, our analysis shows they've somehow converted their entire manufacturing base in just 7 days. Automobile factories are now producing plasma cannons. Computer chip plants are creating quantum processors. Even their food processing facilities have been turned into weapons manufacturing." What made it even more disturbing was how the humans were working together. On the surface, Kyle could see millions of civilians working alongside soldiers with an efficiency that rivaled Vorthak bio-neural coordination. Factory workers and engineers collaborated with military personnel as if they were all part of the same organism. Except unlike the Vorthak, they were doing it without any neural links at all. "Begin standard assault pattern," Kale ordered. "Target their largest population center. Once we demonstrate our power, they'll remember their place." The attack began with 50 Vorthak ships firing their phase weapons simultaneously at New York City. The crystalline beams should have passed through any primitive shielding and vaporized everything they touched. Instead, something impossible happened. The beams struck the city's shields and simply vanished, as if they had never existed at all. "What just happened to our weapons?" Kyle shouted. Down on Earth, Dr. Hyunwoo was celebrating in his underground laboratory beneath Seoul. 3 days ago, he had been a university physicist studying quantum mechanics. Now he was leading a team of thousands of the world's smartest people in the most important research project in human history. "The quantum resonance shields are working perfectly," he announced over the global communication network. "We analyzed the frequency patterns of their phase weapons and created shields that exist in the same dimensional space. Their weapons can't phase through something that's already phased." In a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Colonel So-young was coordinating the counterattack. She had been a special forces officer before the invasion, trained to adapt quickly to changing battlefield conditions. But what she was doing now went far beyond military training. "Dr. Hyunwoo, your team's analysis of their bio-armor is incredible," she said while simultaneously directing missile strikes from 12 different continents. "If their ships are alive, then they can get sick." The Vorthak fleet was about to learn what human creativity looked like when applied to warfare. Colonel So-young's teams had developed something they called bioviruses, computer programs designed to attack living technology. As the Vorthak ships prepared for their second assault, human hackers uploaded these viruses into alien systems through the same bio-neural networks the invaders used for communication. Commander Kale watched in horror as his ships began turning on each other. The biometal hulls started forming random shapes, navigation systems sent vessels spinning out of control, and weapon systems began firing at their own fleet. His living warships were having nervous breakdowns. "Sir, the humans have somehow infected our ships with a technological disease," Science Officer Zix reported, his voice filled with something Vorthak rarely experienced: fear. But what truly terrified Kale was the human response to each of his tactics. When he adapted and created new weapons, the humans analyzed them and developed counters within hours. When he changed his attack patterns, human forces predicted his moves and were waiting for him. Every battle was being watched and studied by millions of human minds working together. In research facilities hidden around the globe, teams of scientists, engineers, students, and even amateur inventors were dissecting every piece of Vorthak, technology they could capture. Dr. Hyunwoo's teams shared their discoveries instantly with Colonel So-young's military units, who immediately tested new tactics in real combat situations. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. Their communications were filled with excitement about each new challenge, as if fighting the most powerful empire in the galaxy was some kind of fascinating puzzle to solve. "Commander," Zix said quietly, "I think we may have made a serious mistake. These humans don't fight like any species we've encountered. They're not trying to survive. They're trying to learn. Every time we hurt them, they become more dangerous." Kyle stared at the blue planet below, watching human cities launch increasingly sophisticated attacks against his fleet. For the first time in his military career, he was beginning to understand what fear felt like. The humans weren't just defending themselves. They were evolving in real time, becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. The siege of Earth had been going on for 4 months, and Commander Kale was beginning to realize he had made the biggest mistake in Vorthak military history. What should have been a simple conquest had turned into a nightmare that was spreading across the entire empire. The first impossible report came from Vorthak Colony 7, a mining world 300 light-years from Earth. The message was brief and terrifying. "Under attack by unknown vessels. Ships appear human in design, but this is impossible. Requesting immediate reinforcement." Kyle stared at the communication in disbelief. How could humans be attacking our colonies? They don't even have faster-than-light travel. More reports flooded in over the following days. Human ships were striking Vorthak supply lines, research stations, and military outposts throughout the Empire. These weren't the primitive chemical rockets Earth had been using just months ago. These were sleek vessels that moved like predators through space, appearing out of nowhere to strike and then vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Back on Earth, engineer Dong Hyun was working 18-hour days in a converted subway tunnel beneath Tokyo. Around him, teams of human engineers, mechanics, and computer specialists worked frantically on projects that should have been impossible. Scattered across dozens of workbenches were pieces of crashed Vorthak ships, each component being studied, understood, and improved upon. The biometal responds to electrical impulses in patterns similar to human neural activity, Dong Hyun explained to his international team through video conference. But instead of just copying their technology, we're making it better. Their ships think like individual organisms. Ours will think like a pack. What Dong Hyun had accomplished in 4 months was staggering. Using salvaged Vorthak technology combined with human engineering principles, his teams had built humanity's first faster-than-light spacecraft. But these weren't copies of alien vessels. They were something entirely new. Human ships were smaller, faster, and more aggressive than Vorthak warships. More importantly, they were designed to work together in ways the aliens had never conceived. Each human vessel could share its sensor data, targeting information, and tactical analysis instantly with every other ship in the fleet. When one ship learned something, they all learned it immediately. Captain Min Seo commanded the first human deep space fleet from the bridge of a ship called Earth's Vengeance. She had been a commercial airline pilot before the invasion, trained to make split-second decisions while keeping hundreds of passengers safe. Now she was leading raids against an alien empire with skills no military academy could have taught her. "All ships remember the plan," she broadcast to her fleet of 12 vessels. "We hit fast, we hit hard, and we make sure every second of this fight gets transmitted back to Earth. Every human watching needs to learn from what we do here." The human attack on Vorthak Research Station Delta 9 was unlike anything the aliens had ever experienced. Instead of trying to overpower the station's defenses, the human ships worked like a pack of wolves hunting a large prey animal. Some vessels drew the station's fire, while others circled around to attack weak points. When one human ship was destroyed, The others immediately adapted their tactics based on what the sacrifice had revealed about enemy capabilities. Most terrifying for the Vorthak was that every human battle was being broadcast live back to Earth. Millions of people watched each engagement, analyzing every move, every weapon, every tactic used by both sides. Human military strategists, video game players, chess masters, and amateur tacticians all contributed ideas that were immediately tested in real combat. When the Vorthak destroyed Captain Minseo's fleet at the Battle of Proxima Station, they expected human attacks to slow down. Instead, within 2 weeks, 10 new human fleets appeared throughout the Empire. Each one fought with perfect knowledge of the tactics that had destroyed the previous fleet, and each one had developed specific countermeasures for every Vorthak weapon system. The new human ships were even more advanced than the first generation. Human engineers had taken Vorthak biometal technology and improved it with modifications the aliens had never imagined. Human vessels could phase through matter like Vorthak ships, but they could also become completely invisible to sensors, split into multiple smaller ships, or combine into larger vessels as needed. Commander Kale received reports of human fleets that seemed to anticipate Vorthak tactics before they were even implemented. Enemy ships would arrive at Vorthak positions with exactly the right weapons and shields needed to counter whatever defenses were waiting for them. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his intelligence officers. "How are they always one step ahead of us?" The answer came from intercepted human communications. Every time a Vorthak commander developed a new strategy, every time an alien scientist created a new weapon, every time the Empire tried a different approach, millions of human minds immediately began working on countermeasures. The entire human species had become a single intelligence focused on war. What made it worse was that humans weren't just matching Vorthak technology. They were improving it in ways that seemed impossible. Human ships moved faster, hit harder, and coordinated better than anything the Empire had ever built. The primitives who had been using chemical rockets 6 months ago were now building vessels that made Vorthak warships look obsolete. Commander Kale stared at tactical displays showing human attacks across dozens of worlds and realized the horrible truth. The Vorthak Empire wasn't just losing battles, it was being out-evolved by a species that treated impossible challenges as interesting problems to solve. The hunters had become the hunted. The war had been raging for 18 months when humanity revealed their ultimate breakthrough. In laboratories hidden deep beneath the Earth's surface, human scientists had achieved something that changed everything. They had learned to extract energy from empty space itself, tapping into the quantum vacuum that existed between atoms, between stars, between thoughts. Dr. Su Jin stood in the main research facility beneath the Sahara Desert, watching displays that showed impossible numbers. "We're pulling unlimited energy directly from the fabric of reality," she announced to the global scientific network. "The Vorthak were draining stars to power their empire, but we've found something better, an energy source that literally cannot run out." This discovery transformed human technology overnight. Ships that had been cobbled together from salvaged alien parts now possessed power sources that dwarfed anything the Vorthak had ever imagined. Human vessels began moving through space like living lightning, appearing and disappearing at will, striking with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand the birth of stars. But the real change wasn't in human technology. It was in human thinking. Admiral Ji-hoon commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled from the bridge of his flagship, Infinite Dawn. His face bore scars from the early days of the war, when human ships were fragile and victories came at terrible cost. Now he looked out at a fleet of vessels that represented something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had evolved beyond its original limitations in less than 2 years. "All fleet commanders, prepare for the final phase," Ji-hoon broadcast to the hundreds of human ships around him. "Remember, we're not here to destroy the Vorthak. We're here to teach them something they've forgotten, how to change." The human fleet approached the Vorthak home system like a force of nature. Their ships moved in patterns that defied physics, phasing in and out of dimensions, sharing energy and information through quantum connections that made the alien bioneural networks look primitive by comparison. Commander Kale watched from his command station as human vessels surrounded the core worlds of his empire. These weren't the desperate fighters who had launched nuclear missiles at his ships 2 years ago. These were beings who had transformed themselves into something beyond what they had been, while still remaining recognizably human. "Sir," his science officer reported, "our analysis of human capabilities shows they now exceed our own in every measurable category. Their energy output is theoretically unlimited. Their coordination is perfect, and their adaptive capacity appears to have no upper limit." Kyle felt something he had never experienced in 3,000 years of conquest: complete helplessness. How did this happen? How did primitives become more advanced than us in such a short time? The answer came in a transmission broadcast across the entire Vorthak Empire. Admiral Ji-hoon's scarred face appeared on every screen, speaking with the calm confidence of someone who had solved an impossible puzzle. "People of the Vorthak Empire," he began, "we've spent the last 18 months studying your species while we fought you. We've learned something interesting about your biology and your history. You stopped evolving 3,000 years ago." Ji-hoon's words sent chills through every Vorthak who heard them. "When you became the galaxy's dominant species, you stopped needing to change. You stopped pushing yourselves. You stopped growing. Your technology advanced, but you as beings remained exactly the same for millennia. In research facilities across human space, teams of scientists had indeed discovered the Vorthak's fatal weakness. The aliens had become evolutionarily stagnant. Their bio-neural networks, their phase technology, their entire civilization was built on ideas that were thousands of years old. They had become so comfortable with their superiority that they had forgotten how to truly adapt. "Humans are different," Ji-hoon continued. "When you pushed us to the edge of extinction, you didn't break us. You forced us to become something greater than we were. Every challenge you gave us made us stronger. Every impossible problem you presented, we solved and then improved upon." Around the Vorthak homeworlds, human ships demonstrated their newfound capabilities. They didn't attack. Instead, they began systematically dismantling Vorthak military installations with precision that was almost artistic. Weapons that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia were carefully disassembled and their energy patterns neutralized. "We're giving you a choice," Admiral Ji-hoon announced. "Withdraw from all the worlds you've conquered. Release all the species you've enslaved. Return to your home systems and learn to coexist peacefully with the rest of the galaxy. Do this and we'll help you remember how to grow again." Commander Kale stared at the tactical displays showing his empire's defenses being systematically neutralized without a single casualty. "And if we refuse?" Ji-hoon's expression grew serious. "Then you'll face a species that treats impossibility as just another engineering problem to solve. We've learned that there's no such thing as can't be done. There's only, we haven't figured out how yet." As Kale watched human ships effortlessly dismantling installations that had protected his people for thousands of years, he finally understood what had happened. The Vorthak had remained static while believing they were superior. Humans had never stopped growing, never stopped changing, never stopped pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The galaxy's apex predators had been dethroned not by superior weapons or advanced technology, but by something far more dangerous, a species that became stronger under pressure and never accepted limitations as permanent. In 18 months, humanity had evolved from throwing nuclear missiles at energy shields to rewriting the laws of physics themselves, and they were still changing, still growing, still becoming something more than they had been the day before. The age of Vorthak dominance was over. The age of human potential had just begun.